Okay, I'd like to open the meeting. It is, what time is it? 6:05. Consideration of the minutes from the meeting, December 15th. Anybody have any corrections, subtractions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as distributed.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, and then do you, any continuing business, Carol?
No, we just have the, we need to appoint, we need
Do you want to
to,
skip over, do that after, or do you want to go in order?
well, I guess we could skip over it.
It's up to you guys. I just figured we could listen to Stuart and then. we
You
can do
guys
that.
okay about
Do
going?
you want to jump to Stuart Anderson and then come back to appointing a ZBA chair and the alternates and other stuff? Or do you want to go?
Yeah, we just have to make sure we know which 5 are voting. So right now we have 3 physically present. So we have to have those people have to be voting people. So that would be Delia Sullivan, John Hamm, and Susan.
We all have to be voting.
I think so.
You can abstain. So we should vote, right?
But then
In order to vote, they
the
need to
question is,
be on
who
it.
are John and Susan standing in for at this hearing? Only because we haven't taken care of that other business first.
Or do you
should
want-
appoint
huh?
first.
You
Yeah,
want to do the
'cause
appointment
my
first?
term
Yeah, why don't we go
expired.
ahead and appoint?
I
Okay.
think we should appoint.
Okay, so any nominations for a chair of the ZBA?
I'll nominate Ray.
Volunteers?
Nominate Ray DeMonte.
Second.
You have a second? Any
Second.
discussion?
You might ask Ray if he wants to do it.
Yeah.
You
Ray, are
wanna do
you okay with that?
I am. Thank you all for considering me.
Okay, and all those in favor of electing Ray to chair of the ZBA, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay, thank you, Ray.
Okay, and what about the vice chair? I
And-
forgot about the vice chair.
Okay, and any nominations for a vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Mark Herman.
I knew I should have been not present.
Well,
Well, it
congratulations.
would have been
Oh,
easier,
you're
then
elected.
nobody would have voted
Yeah.
against.
I'll second the motion as long as we have 2 attorneys, that don't make the meetings go beyond 2 hours.
Okay, all those in favor of Mr. Erman as the vice chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, thank you, Mr. Erman.
I oppose it. I want that to be recorded.
Okay, you oppose it. You accept the nomination, sir.
I do.
Okay, an appointment of alternates. Now do,
Yeah, the Susan can basically continue until she has been replaced. Now, we asked her if she was willing to be reappointed and she said yes, right?
Remember that differently, but okay. Well, we need you to be there.
Right. So anyway, and John's, his office has not expired. He's an alternate. His office
Mine
has not expired. But Susan is expiring in March, so you could appoint her as an alternate, not to take effect until the meeting is over.
So moved.
do you want to do it,
Do you
Susan?
want
or
to
do
be an
you want-
alternate again?
You want to
I'm so
do it,
confused.
Susan?
Okay, do you want to continue being an alternate after this meeting? Because you're an alternate through the meeting.
I see.
And if you don't want to, that's fine. And if you do, that's fine too.
I'll be an alternate.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So then the question is, who are the 5 people voting? So we have
Tonight?
these 3 tonight. Because we have 3 people present and I believe they have to be voting people on this hearing because we have
Quorum has to be a vote.
the quorum, has to be
Yeah.
present to vote.
Yeah.
So we can have 2 more of you on Zoom participate as a voting member. I mean, you can all participate, but as a voting member.
I'd like to defer to the two older gentlemen, Mr. DeMonte and Mr. Ehrman. And I will step down and not vote this evening, but I would like to participate.
Okay, good. All right, so you're all set.
We need a motion for that. That's fine. No, we're fine with that.
I'd say.
I'll make that in the form of a motion, John.
Okay.
All right,
I'll second that.
Delia will second it. All in favor of the two old gentlemen being voting members tonight. Say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Congratulations, men. Now, we need to set up a date to review and or revise the ZBA rules of procedure. Carol, have any recommendations? Do we have to set it up now or can that wait till the next meeting?
well, I think you're gonna get a bunch of these,
Okay,
right? You're gonna get a bunch of these requests for variances for retaining walls in the setback area, so.
I think we're gonna get more than this one, is that what
Oh,
you're
yeah.
saying?
Oh, yeah. So
Retaining
you
wall.
could wait for the next meeting, which will not be scheduled until I have an actual application.
Okay.
So you could wait and do that, but you have to, you have to be ready to talk about those changes on that date. So
So,
it's up to you. I can either do a separate meeting.
Mr. Demonte, the future chair of this board, do you have any input on this?
I think we're heading in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's just.
Carol, point of information. Have you sent copies of the current rules and are there any proposed changes on the table?
Yeah.
Well, we couldn't agree on any of them. The last time we discussed them, I think in 2018, we couldn't agree on any of them, and so we didn't make any changes. But I sent you both the current, which does need to be updated, and the proposed changes from 2018 that were never adopted. So you have both of those on an email that you got on Friday, I think. Last Friday. So you have them, you just have to, I don't know, ponder them.
And the change, Carol, if I may, the changes look pretty simple. There only looked to be 7 or 8 of them and they weren't very substantial in my opinion, but I'm not an attorney.
I thought you were a non-voting member for this evening.
Oh, he can still have
Little
input.
talk.
I'm participating, Mr. Vice Chairman, in the discussion.
It is.
Is there a motion to adopt the amendments as proposed?
I think we should leave it on the agenda for the next
Yeah,
meeting.
I
when
think
you're
it should
chair,
be for the
and we
next
can discuss
meeting.
it.
Okay, move them to the agenda next month.
Okay.
Carol?
Yeah.
So 6 p.m., request for a variance for 2 retaining walls greater than 4 feet in height within the 25-foot setback area, front setback area. And I guess Mr. Anderson's up to bat.
Well, you might want to like open up your maps.
I'm looking at my map.
So thank you for your time, everyone. I'm here on behalf of Bill and Beth Russell, acting as agent of record for them this evening. I believe you have a letter on file authorizing me to act on their behalf. Requesting a variance from Article 4, Section B, Paragraph 2, Paragraph 4, the dimensional chart to allow the construction of a retaining wall within, or 2 retaining walls within the setback. As you know, the town deems retaining wall to be a permanent structure and is therefore subject to the same setback rules as buildings. Both of these walls will be in excess of 4 feet at times, so therefore, again, are subject to the same setback rules. With respect to the variance application and the criteria for a variance, under number 1, the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. We would say that granting the variance does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood It is a residential neighborhood in the landing within Lincoln, and is certainly not contrary to the zoning intent. The granting the variance does not threaten the health, safety, or general welfare of the public, as this is located on a private lot that wouldn't typically have public access. To the point of the variance being to the spirit of the ordinance, again, granting the variance would be within the spirit of the ordinance. This is a single-family home neighborhood, and the proposal is to allow the construction of a driveway associated with a single-family home. Granting the variance does not cause increased congestion or overcrowding. Again, it's part of a single-family home. Granting the variance would do substantial justice because, again, it's consistent with the area's use, and there's no gain to the public that outweighs the loss to the individual in this particular scenario. Granting the variance would granting the variance would not be subject to the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. Again, this is consistent with the neighborhood, with other properties that are in the neighborhood. So again, the construction of a single family home here would probably in fact just increase the value of the neighborhood and surrounding homes. And to the question of hardship, really given the site topography in this particular scenario, without the possibility to construct these retaining walls, it practically makes this lot unbuildable. Because of the nature of how steep the driveway would have to become, it would put the driveway well in excess of 12% pitch, which would be problematic to manage throughout the winter months. Also, it would increase the potential height of the overall dwelling because we would have to relocate the house to a position on the site that would characterize it such that the drop off on the downhill side would be so significant that on the downhill side, excuse me, the house would be 4 or 5 stories tall. I believe you have copies of the map in front of you that identify the location of these walls. There's one within the front setback. You'll see that it stands parallel to the driveway. It's tagged on there as being at its highest point. It's 8.5 feet high. It then diminishes at either end back to almost nothing as it approaches the grade. And then again, there is another one that is to the kind of northwest. You'll see it just directly adjacent to the driveway as it comes off of Hatel Road. And again, this one at its peak is 7 feet tall. These walls would be constructed as, or more than likely be constructed as segmented, prefabricated retaining walls and would be structurally engineered accordingly. At this point, I'm here said on behalf of the owners to request a variance to allow these retaining walls to be constructed, and then the subsequent application for a land use permit to construct the home.
Stuart, do you have any, sorry to bother you, do you have any drawings or images of any walls constructed as the ones you are suggesting for this location from another prior installation somewhere else?
Yes. So yes, Mark, but not with me. There are several others in town like that. If you as you drive through South Peak, you'll see several in South Peak. Some of the abutment to the bridge, the ski bridge that you pass under, are built of similar fashion. There are also several private homes within South Peak that have these as well. I would be happy to send the board pictures or examples of these.
Only if somebody else wants them as well, wants to look at them.
Typically, we use these walls because they're easier to engineer and install compared to boulder walls, are subject to potential erosion behind them, which can lead to potential failure. Plus, it's very hard to get a structural engineer to really endorse a rock retaining wall.
Stuart,
Yes, Rick.
again, had a little trouble hearing some of the technical aspects of your presentation. These are engineered walls, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, and they have drainage controls behind them
Yes,
and mechanical stabilization?
yes. They'll be subject to obviously the town's structural requirement for a structural engineer to sign off on the design of them as well as the installation throughout construction. And I believe there's the affidavit of construction, post-construction, the structural engineer did oversee the construction during the process.
Another aspect relative to this site, first of all, really a great layout. I mean, there's only so much you can do with a site with challenges, and I think everybody has worked hard to accomplish what you're presenting tonight. I noticed that, of course, the outlet for Hay Hill Road and the roads above, the drainage outlet comes out right at this site and then goes between the two buildings, the proposed building and the existing building. How far, relative to surface erosion and so forth, how far does the pipe go between the two buildings so that it doesn't damage either foundation?
I believe the end of the culvert pipe is as depicted on the drawing, that it only extends maybe 5 or 6 feet onto this property, and then it's not actually controlled by a pipe rather than a swale down between the two properties.
Right.
That's the existing condition we have.
It's the existing condition, but you do have more drainage coming as development, I'm going to call it upstream, up the hill. It continues, so that the drainage is going to increase. Does this swale and the other controls take that into consideration between the two properties so we don't damage either home?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there is subject right now within the landing, that parts of the landing, a lot of those lots within phase 2 of the landings have to address any additional runoff on their property. And I think Ray Carver's online. I think he could probably talk better to that. There are properties within phase 1, I believe that's under review right now, as to the level in which they need to mitigate all their additional runoff on property. I think the challenge we would have here, Ray, is that swale is as much, if not more, on the neighbor's property than it is on this applicant's property. So to actually affect change there would have to be some type of mutual agreement between multiple parties, because it bridges multiple lots.
I understand. I think it would be in both parties' interest to maximize the protection to their properties. So is that something you think you can discuss with the neighbor?
Potentially, I have no relationship or contact with the neighbor, but it's certainly something that could be explored.
It may in the long run be important to both of them. I think their interests are mutual. It's the same water, it's going to increase, it's coming from the same spot, and it's basically has a potential to impact both properties. I would like to see that explored to protect these properties. Stuart, another question.
Yes.
On the lower road, the landing main entry road, there's a couple locations where there's stones that have come off the wall. It's awful high. There's no mark as to where the property lines are between the Russell lot and the lot immediately beside it that we're discussing with the home on it. Do you have any idea where, relative to those stones, on whose lot are they located? The stone gaps, because the stones have fallen.
I don't have a definitive answer for you. Some of that may fall on the common land, that is the landing associations, and not actually on the private property. Those walls are very close proximity to where the transition of the right-of-way from Landing Road turns to private property. I don't have an accurate depiction of exactly where those rocks are in reference to this parcel.
I think they're these two, and these are the pictures.
Right. Right, Carol's showing me a picture, and we can see what is the existing neighboring house that's already constructed, which would suggest these walls are further this direction.
Well, so we think they're here.
Well, that's the existing. There's a house here,
Right
which would have to be this one. So those walls are likely further north.
Well, these are the,
That's an extension of them, correct?
well, anyway, there's some issues with them.
Correct. And the homeowners association is aware that there are retaining walls that were put in as part of the original development subdivision that do need to be addressed. But that is not part of the scope of works as pertaining to this client's project.
Does the homeowners association acknowledge that they are responsible to fix those stones that have fallen?
I would have to ask them. I couldn't give you a definitive answer on that.
Okay, I think we should include that as a submittal so that we know that they're going to be addressed either by the property owners or by the association. It's kind of hard to know which is which in terms of responsibility when you get this close.
I agree, but with due respect, I don't think it's necessarily part and parcel of the variance application that's on the table.
To some degree, I would suggest that all conditions and issues on the relative to the site come up when you're asking for a variance that would include perhaps a drainage issue in the long run. So it's a existing condition that impacts the site's integrity, and I think it should be addressed.
Can I ask a question, Stuart?
Yes.
It's showing a 7-foot wall through the wetlands.
Correct.
Can you talk about that? I mean, I didn't think we could build in the wetlands, so here we have a wall in the wetland.
No, that will be, right, they will have to address that accordingly with the state and any mitigation of the wetlands. So there will be.
Is that wall already there, or they want to build it?
No, the 7-foot wall is new. It does not exist today.
But they want to put it in the, I was understanding you can't build in the wetlands, can?
There is an acceptable amount of disturbance of wetlands, and that will have to get permitted through the state.
And that permit is pending.
Correct.
So that would, I think obtaining that permit is another condition.
Correct. It seemed logical to come before you first, though, to ensure that this is permissible before we actually apply to the state.
I agree with you, Stuart.
Well, how wide's the driveway?
12 feet.
You kind of get almost like a hammerhead there, so I appreciate that as far as getting an engine to the home.
So can you get around the corner like that?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
with our engine too, yeah. So it's a plus that it's not gonna be like a super downgrade to get to the site, especially, in the wintertime, trying to get an engine onto the property to, God forbid they having a fire there or something.
We do have Ray Corber on. We asked him to come in case there are any questions that people had that he could help us address.
Carol, I would ask Ray to speak on the issues that we've just been discussing.
Hello, everyone.
Right. Hi, Ray.
Hi, Ray.
All right.
Hi, Mark.
So,
Jack, how you doing?
Good.
Good. So Ray, you want me to, where do you want me to start on the issues?
Well, the engineered walls as a starting point, it would seem that they comply. What is your professional opinion?
Yeah, as far as retaining walls are concerned, the requirements and criteria are pretty well spelled out, and I think Stuart articulated them clearly. So I don't think I can add anything necessarily to that.
Excellent.
I do like the fact that they're coming in with proposing engineered walls instead of the rockery walls that sometimes we see on these sites. The engineered walls are a much better solution, particularly for these lots that have steep slopes to them.
Yeah,
So,
I join you in that statement because it's very important, and I think they're doing the right thing.
Yep. So I think that's positive. Looking at the plan, doing a quick takeoff, we noted that there's one wall section that's about 25 feet long. That's only 4 feet in height, and it's within the setback. And my understanding, Carol can weigh in here, but my understanding is that as long as it's 4 feet or less, then you can in fact build a retaining wall within the setback. Is that true, Carol?
Yeah, it's not considered a structure. So the
Right.
portion that's in the setback, that's less than 4 feet, is okay.
So that 25-foot section that appears, and it's actually it's what makes up allows the hammerhead in the driveway. That section of retaining wall, it's called out as 4 feet. So that's allowable, doesn't need a variance. And the other sections of wall that do need a variance, obviously, are the entrance drive to the property. There's about 75 feet of wall within the setback limit there. There's also the wall that was mentioned that's in the wetlands. I think there's it looks like about 28 feet of wall at that location, and there's a small section of, well, actually a small section of wall about 4 feet in the setback, but again, that's at 4 feet. So you have about probably 100 feet of wall that's within the setback. So I just wanted to let everybody know the length of the wall that you're talking about in terms of this relative to this variance. The other thing I would note is there's about a 23-foot section of wall actually over the property line into the right of way. So I don't know, it's probably out of the town's jurisdiction and in the homeowner's jurisdiction. So Stuart, I guess one of the questions I would have for you is, I mean, is the homeowners association okay with that, having that wall within the right of way? And one of the concerns I would have there is, where's the ditch line for the Hay Hill Road, to be sure that you're not encroaching on the ditch line and any stormwater runoff that might be coming down Hay Hill.
Yes, no, good point. This would, like any project in the landing, is subject to the homeowners association review and approval process as well. So that would be obviously part and parcel of what they would have to get in order to apply for land use permit.
Okay, all right. So one of the things you may want to, I think Horizon's the engineer of record here, right?
Correct.
One of the things you might want to bring that up to Horizons in terms of their consideration. Just be sure that you're not compromising the drainage swale along Hay Hill Road with that extension of wall into the right of way. So as far as the walls themselves, Ray, that would be, the only comment I would have relative to the retaining walls. Any questions around that?
I don't think so.
Okay. The other issue, Ray, I think you brought up what had to do with the cross culvert at Hay Hill Road entering onto between these two parcels that adjoin one another. One is according to this drawing, It is the William Wall parcel. Is that the culvert you're talking about, Ray?
Yes, correct.
So if you look at where the discharge is for the outlet for that culvert, there's, according to the survey here, it discharges into a wetland area. So I haven't been on the site, so I don't know if there's actually a swale that runs from that outlet all the way down gradient to the landing road, but I can see from some of the contours that it appears that it does. It looks like maybe there's a swale that runs along the edge of the wetland area. So so that wetland is gonna attenuate some of the whatever's coming out, whatever flows are coming out of the end of that pipe. So that's a good thing, is my point. Whether it ultimately impacts the two respective properties, hard to say at this point. But again, your point is well taken. At least maybe give both these property owners a heads up, saying that, it may be problematic in the future. You might want to keep your eye on it. I don't think the way the grading is proposed here that it's necessarily problematic, because you can see the limit of disturbance around the building on the garage side of the building. It looks like they kept it as tight as they probably can, given the steep grades in that area. Because you're looking at up by the driveway, the existing condition, you're looking at almost 50% slopes there, which is kind of crazy to put a house up there, but it is what it is. The lower end of the site down by the landing road is it looks like the grades are on the order of 25%. So it's a little more conducive to construction and building construction. So I guess my only comment on that would be I think your point is well taken. It is a cause of concern, but I would leave it up to the property owners to monitor that and see if it's an issue, because there's nothing much you can do that's better than what you have, from what I see here on the plan.
Right. Ray, more long-term question, and I'm thinking about upstream water and the impact that it could have on the Russell property. Should we consider some kind of a condition that says that future activity upstream should take into consideration deferring, delaying, retaining storm drainage, so that they don't just keep, when I say they, upstream owners don't just continue to drop more water onto the Russell property?
That's an excellent observation, because that's, as we do the reviews in the landing, because we hadn't seen a lot of development in the landing over the more recent years. It's really been within probably the last, I don't know, Stuart, you probably know better than I do, within the last 12 months or so, that we've seen more activity and more development. So your point is an excellent point. And it's something that, as we go through the peer review process, we're taking a good hard look at. When we did a review, I think Stuart had mentioned that we reviewed the phase 2 alteration of terrain permit to determine essentially what we're looking to do there is, even though the alteration terrain permit is for the build out of the infrastructure, the road network, the utilities, et cetera, there are assumptions that are put into the drainage analysis about what is the density of the development and how each lot ultimately gets built out. So we look at that pretty carefully to be sure that what was contemplated under the AOT, because it was approved by the planning board back in the day, under those assumptions and criteria are held throughout the project's lifespan. So we took a good hard look at that, and as Stuart had mentioned, for the phase 2 of the landing, the assumption that was made in the drainage analysis back in, I guess it was 2005 or so, when this development was contemplated, was that all stormwater would be mitigated on every lot, meaning net zero runoff from each of the lots. So I know that's probably a long answer, but I think that probably addresses the question that you're asking here is how do we mitigate the stormwater runoff up gradient from the lots that are located down gradient, because as we know, the water flows downhill and it affects the people downstream rather than upstream. So That's really in my opinion, the best way to handle that is that all the lots on the, I think it's, Ron, correct me, it's the back 40 road and the, what is it called? Back road is the other one, the second phase of that.
Yes, yeah, so it's back 40 that would affect, I believe, this applicant's location, runoff from the back 40. Buck Road is below this. Proposed.
And so the reason why we go back in the record and look at these types of issues and understand what was approved by the planning board is because you can see on that, if you look at the the note on that culvert, it's a 15-inch diameter culvert. It's not very big for envision the landing at full build out, and they're not building 2,500 square foot homes up here. They're building 6,000-7,000 square foot homes. So what was contemplated in terms of the size and the density in terms of the impervious area on this side of the hill or mountain, it really behooves the town to be very cautious and careful about how the stormwater is being handled and managed on the site, because that 15-inch diameter culvert can easily be wind up being undersized if you're not dealing with the upgrading issues proactively and correctly.
Ray, you've hit the nail right on the head in terms of my concern. And the way I see the result of what we've just discussed is the Russells do not need, with these conditions, they do not need to worry about upstream development overwhelming their site with drainage. Every site has to contain its own drainage and delay it.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
And I just to follow up on that, it is a challenge. So you can imagine on these steep slopes, you do have to clear out quite a bit of area to put in the building.
Yeah.
It is a challenge because the only way to really deal with it and get a net zero runoff on each one of these single family house lots is to infiltrate. Well, the challenge when you infiltrate is you typically don't want to infiltrate on a steep slope because it makes the slope unstable. So it is going to be a challenge to make to meet that criteria on the properties that are going in the back 40. I do know that the projects that are coming in front of us, a lot of the, and I think it's really a smart idea by the developer is to merge 2 and 3 lots and build one home on 2 and 3 lots. It reduces the density, it gives them more footprint in order to deal more effectively with the stormwater runoff. So just to really encourage that, that seems to be moving in a very positive direction. So the developer should be commended for that approach.
Well, let me tell you where some of these questions are coming from. When the main road into the landing was being constructed, right in the general area of the northeast corner of this lot, there was a very tall manhole, maybe 15 plus feet tall. And during one storm, after it had been backfilled and everything else, the water just flowed over this lot and the ones upstream and literally toppled the manhole. It was buried. It was like a matchstick. And I think that happened twice in the construction of the road. So I don't want that to happen to the Russell lot again. And they are within feet of where that happened. It would be devastating to their lot. So that bit of history is what's bringing up this concern to protect the lot from increased drainage entering it, let alone exiting it.
Yeah. I think in terms of, if you look at the alignment of that cross culvert at Hay Hill Road, you can see that, it's gonna direct the water, into the woods, and into that wetland area. So again, you'll get some attenuation, you get some dissipation of the flow. So that's all a good thing. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's, again, this is the challenge that Lincoln has, building on slopes like this. You know, you're probably well aware that many communities, you know, a steep slope is 15%. And, you know, you need conditional approval to build on anything over 15%. And some communities actually prohibit building on anything over 25%. So we're dealing with 50%.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
It is. So, and you add the added level of complexity of building a large home on these lots. You wind up clearing a lot more of the natural vegetation and the woodland out than you would, because that's what slows down the rate of flow that you just mentioned. It's going to be a challenge long term. And one of the challenges that I see for these developments is, one of the things that we require, is required under the stormwater management ordinance, is to submit an inspection and maintenance plan. And the challenge that I think the Lincoln community is going to have going forward is to make sure that the property owners are actually inspecting and maintaining whatever stormwater mitigation practices that they put into their single family house lots. Think about it. I mean, if you have 50, 60 of these going in, you know, the town's got to take a good hard look at how do we make sure that the homeowner is doing what's called for in the inspection and maintenance plan 10 years from now, 12 years from now.
Yeah.
So it's not an ideal situation that you find yourself in on these subdivisions here.
One condition that would help with other lots is not clear cutting all lots. Leave some vegetation to absorb some of that water, some of that drainage.
I would agree. And that's one of the things that we try to encourage through the peer review process is, you know, we work with the consultants to, you know, brainstorm and, you know, try to figure out what's the best way to limit the area of disturbance, you know, and keep as much of the natural vegetation as you possibly can, because again, it's that rate of runoff coming off of the hill. It's going to be a different scenario if you get another hurricane come through the town of Lincoln once the landing is fully built out than what's happened in the past. It's just a fact. So you want to, now's the time to, you know, focus some energy and effort behind making sure doing the best you can in order to mitigate this, since you've approved the subdivision up on the mountain.
Thank you, Ray. John, I don't have any other questions at this point.
Anybody else? Any questions?
I do have a comment to Stuart, and that is brilliant design. You got a very tough site. I consider this fabulous.
Oh, there are tougher ones to go.
Yes.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Sharpen your pen
Yes.
or your eraser.
Yeah, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah.
So, you know, getting back to the maintaining the infrastructure, do you have, does the HOA, or do you know, does the HOA have any sort of long-term maintenance plan for any of the, like the walls in the, that are along the roadway, or?
There
you just
is,
have no idea?
I don't know the specifics of it, but obviously there are a long-term maintenance plan for all of the common land to be maintained. But I will certainly follow up on the lower walls and can certainly get the board an answer on that from the homeowners association.
Because you know, prior to this, I've been kind of ignoring the pre-existing walls that were on the lots themselves. But, you know, now I'm thinking about them. So anyway, I just don't want any more tragedies. That's all.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Jack Bailey.
in the past, when there has been failure of boulders that have fallen from the wall, I believe Lincoln Construction has gone down there and repaired them at the request of the homeowners and or the property manager.
Okay, well, maybe somebody needs to contact them again and have them fix those walls.
I would assume that they're waiting for the wetness to cease and the weather to get a little bit better before they bring in some heavy equipment up there. There is a road limit tonnage on the Black Mountain Road leading into that.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you, Chad.
um,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
kind of a follow-up question to Carol. Do we have, does the town have some indication of what walls are privately owned and what walls are association responsibility in the landing? I mean, it applies everywhere, but you know, and coming up Hay Hill, for example, once you start, take the curve down there and then start up to the south and then the southwest, there's 3 stone walls above you. Are they all association responsibility? Not relevant to this site, but I think relevant to the overall inquiry that we're trying to establish a standard and responsibility so that the town would know who to contact to do what.
I'm assuming they're all HOA maintained, because those are private roads, so I can't imagine.
But then you got lot property lines and you got property lines that include the stone walls. So
Like here.
if there's any vagueness, it would be appropriate, I think, to try to clarify this with the association.
Well, I suppose we could ask, maybe that's a condition of each one. This is determine who's responsible for the other walls on your property. And basically let us know, we'll put it in the file. I mean, I'm just trying to sort of brainstorm here.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Why don't you start at the top and ask the current majority shareholder in the HOA, which is the developer who bought it out of bankruptcy. The lawyers have examined. Pardon?
I said, I would think to bring him into the office and get him to explain the position of the situation, correct?
Well, I would think it would be written because I know that his lawyers have examined it assiduously. And I think it wouldn't be that hard to get a written statement from them. My understanding is that it's not the homeowners association, but is rather the individual homeowners' individual responsibility for any of those walls which are on or abutting or adjacent to or demarcate their properties. But I don't have any concrete evidence of that, but that was my understanding. And I would put it to Joe Lynch and I would ask for a written response. I wouldn't have them come into the office and give you blah, blah. I would want law, written words.
And if the homeowners are responsible for it, then would the association kind of be the one to tell the homeowner, hey, your wall's coming down, you need to do something about it? I would ask them to put something in writing about that, how they plan to handle that when something's falling down.
Well, if the person who owns the property is responsible for the wall, there's not going to be an enforcement mechanism. I don't know.
But if it's going to impact
I agree with
downtown
Carol.
property, I don't know.
I agree with Carol that I think it's more likely that there is not such a mechanism, but I don't know the facts. So I would ask for the facts, and I don't think there's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
So why don't we send them a letter?
have it answered in advance for all of these homes that are coming up.
Yeah, because
We just need an answer from the HOA or from the owner of the majority of shares in the residual properties, what the structure is, because as I said, you know, Pretty Flaherty, as the attorney for that pulled it out of the bankruptcy. And they examined all this stuff in great detail. And I'm sure they know. Kara Sweeney was the lawyer who headed that undertaking, and I'm sure that she could write a relatively accurate answer off the top of her head, you know, having done all the work relatively recently, instead of us guessing.
Okay, so what we would do is, the ZBA wants to write a letter.
I don't know, you could have the town of Lincoln write a letter.
I don't think it's a ZBA, Carol, because it doesn't affect this decision, correct? It would be the town or you as the town representative
Maybe the
answering the question for whoever future.
Well, the problem is that there are deeds, and then there are the declarations and the covenants, and, you know, who knows where it is.
Yeah.
I'll write the letter and get them to provide it to you.
Well, I would want them to answer the question rather than give us the
Yeah.
a basis for the answer. I think they can simply provide an answer to the question, because they have a very valuable possession, that law firm, which is a huge liabilities insurance policy.
Oh, do you have a question?
Yeah, just in regard to scaling down this project so that the walls were inside the setback, is that a possibility? Like, what would be plan B if we didn't give the variance? What would your plan B be?
I think the scale of the house almost is irrelevant, because the issue becomes connecting the driveway to Hay Hill Road. And actually getting an appropriate pitch of driveway means we need to retain the earth to avoid having an excessively steep driveway. There are restrictions within the association's rules as to how steep the driveways can be within the landing. So I don't think scaling the house is actually going to make a whole lot of difference, because we're still a house that's beyond the setback connecting to Hay Hill Road. Part of it to here, this happens to be one of the lots that falls within, there are two different zones within the landing, so therefore two different setbacks depending on where you fall within the landing. This is in the more restrictive section of the landing, so it has 25-foot setbacks, whereas a lot or the majority of the rest of the landing only has 15-foot setbacks. So I don't know the history behind why the landing ended up in two different zones, but obviously it makes these lots even harder, because you know that's the first 25 feet of the lot from the plot line, which, you know, the plot line is already, you know, 15 feet so back from the road edge. So now you're talking of an area that could be 35 to 40 feet. And to Ray's point earlier, that we're approaching 50% slope in that zone. It's how do we connect the driveway to the road? And I mean, those are almost two givens, regardless of the scale of the project.
I personally don't believe that we need an answer to that question before we decide on giving a variance or not.
Agreed.
I think we can grant this variance if we decided to do so. I see no reason not to grant it, and that's just my opinion. But without having an answer, I think we need to have an answer on record eventually, and I think we should start getting it now.
This is Ray. I concur completely with what Mark just said.
And I think that no matter what the answer is in terms of who's responsible, I don't think it is determinative, because I think that either way, there are remedies that the town could apply to decide how to solve that problem if it should arise. I don't think it's insoluble, and I don't think we should delay this particular project from going forward. I think we should find a way to make it happen or allow it to happen, but we should proceed to acquire the information we need in order to rationalize the whole process going forward.
I agree with that completely.
Can I raise another point, which is to some extent unrelated, but we have two people in town who are very knowledgeable about how to do these things on a practical level. I'm not talking about experts like Stuart or Ray or other engineers or other architects. Those people obviously have expertise. But we have Rex and his business, who's been doing this for a long time, and we have Taylor and his business, who've been doing it for not quite as long a time, perhaps, or maybe the same amount of time. And I think it would be of interest to invite them to participate and comment on any solutions that we're thinking about, or at least say what they think about these problems and give us the benefit of their local knowledge. Boy, is that the equivalent of slapping the host at the Emmys?
Yeah, We'll talk to you about it
That
later.
was a great idea. Great idea, or concur.
Well,
Because I can think of something that we could do, and I realize that increasing the diameter of the culverts going down the roads, I think we could find a way to drain the uphill lots laterally that would be more productive than focusing exclusively on fall line drainage in this extremely unusual site, because we have pathways to get to the river that either go through, that could be less expensive perhaps and easier to modify, namely along Hay Hill Road, then across Hay Hill Road at the boundary of Landing Road, and perhaps under the road. And where there may be existing culverts or whatever, and there may be costs associated with that, but I think overall, those costs might be a lot lower than dealing with every landowner, dealing with it individually on every lot, and making some sort of giant scheme to make sure nobody damages the guy next door. I think we could do an overall. I mean, the original development should have done that in the first place and probably did so to some extent. You know.
Correct.
But I think we could improve, mitigate as best we can now, number one. Number two, I know that the owner, Joe Lynch, is planning on encouraging combining lots for the purposes just described before, which I think is also salutary. And I own 4 lots up there, and I'm going to try to combine 2 or 3 of them at least. In that fashion for that same reason. I would be very interested in doing something that took advantage of the natural drainage pathways that water has had previously on these slopes, and engineering it not necessarily within pipes or within culverts, but to some extent within culverts and to some extent not so much. I think we could do a lot with relatively little.
The next step, Carol?
Okay, the next step,
I'll let Delia answer her question first.
The neighboring house, do you know if that had a variance to go into the setback? Because it looks, is it within 25 feet of
it's
this?
before my time, so I don't know.
Because if every lot wants to go into the setbacks, what's the point of the setbacks? Like that house definitely looks like it's closer than 25 feet.
Definitely.
And then,
That one probably got permitted in 2008 or 9.
Yeah, 2008 or 9, I wasn't
Okay.
here,
Like-
so I don't know.
just to know.
But that's the one with the failure.
This one?
6 Hay Hill, the one next door.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one right here. That's where the retaining wall avalanched.
That's kind of what stimulated the conversation and brought forward the stormwater management ordinance,
Right.
was that situation.
Stuart, you got anything to add or no? You feel comfortable?
No, I think it is smart to tackle the landing holistically in terms of understanding the retaining walls, because I think there probably are complications. I mean, I think this lot, an example, one of those retaining walls is teetering on the property boundary. So it's right, whose land is it on, what was written into the deed, what easements for maintenance were granted. I don't know the answers to that, but it would be good to define that. I agree.
Are we ready to vote on it, Carol? We're gonna
So, yeah,
continue it with the
get out
stipulations,
your
or
worksheet,
where are we headed?
you know, and you can also the,
Public session? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
yeah, comments from the
I
public.
would like to open it for public comments.
Bill Shannon, Town resident. I actually helped sign some of these permits for this building and when Saber Mountain came in. I was vice chair of the planning board and chair of the zoning board at that time. Some of the comments Ray made about the drainage. Some of those pipes are 18-inch. They're full of sand, you only get this much of it you want to go through. You just dump it up 18 feet in the other guy's property, even though you have a natural swale, it increases the velocity and the amount of dirt coming into it. And plus, some of it goes down to the next road, comes down past Daly's house and Treniso's house, and goes down to Ray DeMonte's house and those properties. So we get to watch, get to be very careful how much drainage we can put down there with the data we have on our plans. Because you could create a catastrophic event for several houses, different roads, different levels of the road. And that idea you're putting in with the pre-constructed walls is a great idea, should have been done a long time ago. Not safer, it's more. As long as you have enough drainage, we come in through it and under it, it saves a lot of aggravation. So just dumping the water 10, 50 feet down below the house and then a swale is not going to solve the problems of the ones down here. Like I said, I was privy to all the declarations on these maps. You're looking at them, take them out. And a few people from left the town that was privy to it and it was on.
Any discussion about the, is there a way to make the wall under 7 feet, so you don't need a variance?
We'd have to get under 4 feet.
I mean, under 4 feet, I'm sorry, it's 4 up, 4 over, 4 up, 4 over.
Not really. You run out of property is the problem.
Yeah.
To tier it and,
Yeah.
and various tiers of 4-foot walls, there just isn't physically enough land to make that
To
work.
carry it out.
Right.
We want to go over the worksheet. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, and we need to do, probably should do some findings of fact. I just started it, and if there's any relevant facts, you have to kind of take that out. There's a findings of fact sheet. It's just started, like parcel owned by so-and-so was located.
Okay, I'll use those. Okay.
Okay, so you kind of want 3 documents out in front of you. One is the findings of fact. Then there's the application, his application where he states the facts in support of granting the variance. And then there's the worksheet. So the first question is, have all the parts?
I believe I do, probably not. I don't know. I got this, right? This is what we want right here? Yeah, I think that's what I got. Right. Okay, so number 1. Granting the variance would or would not be contrary to the public interest because You want me to read what he put down or no, or we gotta,
Well, or I can read it.
okay, you go ahead and read
Is
it.
it still a
Okay.
public session?
Oh, I'm sorry. We're gonna close the public session. Any more public comments?
If you don't have enough comment, enough data, you can always continue the hearing to a date specific. If you need more data from Ray or some of the other people.
Okay.
Very cool, I mean.
Do we feel as a board, we need more data and input before we finish this? And schedule it for another meeting, or are we comfortable with moving forward?
I would be comfortable moving forward. I think we've really exhausted the issues.
Yep.
And Stuart's got a really comprehensive proposal in front of us. I didn't hear anything that required us to stop the process.
Thank you.
I agree.
Okay, so the first one is granting the variance would or would not be contrary to the public interest because, and then Stuart in his application says, granting the variance does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, allowing for the construction of a single-family home, nor is it contrary to the zoning intent. Granting the variance does not threaten the health, safety, or general welfare of the public as it located on a private home lot. So you can decide to adopt what it is that he's proposed in his application, or you can vary it, and then you decide, vote a sense of the meeting about whether it would or would not be contrary to the public interest. And then at the end, you would vote to either grant or not grant the variance, depending on whether it met all the criteria. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ray.
we've had a very extensive discussion of issues, which obviously is on tape and will be in our minutes. I think a reasonable way to proceed would be a general reference back to these various conditions, and they would be in the text of the narrative without having to redo each and every one. I mean, I've got several pages here, and I think we've all been on the same page as these issues have come up, along with the applicant. So it's one thing to adopt this, and we could just say with the additional conditions and discussions in the minutes of the meeting, because they're extensive.
Yes. So granting, do we want to answer on one? Granting the variance would not be contrary to public interest, and then list what's he's written down plus our stipulations?
plus with additional conditions and discussions as in the meeting minutes.
Yes, okay. Do we, and then number two, do we want to go on to number two?
Well, why don't you see if everybody's
Okay,
on board
Sarah.
with number one?
Do you want to poll the board to take a vote on number one? Is
In
everybody
favor?
In favor of number one, the way written with the stipulations. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. And we can move on to number two. If the variance, excuse me. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed because.
Granting the variance is within the spirit of the ordinance to allow for the construction of a single-family home in a residential neighborhood. Granting the variance does not cause increased congestion or overcrowding. And then you could add it in addition with additional conditions and discussions as reflected in the meeting minutes.
Yes.
Take a poll, everybody agree with number two?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Opposed, abstained. Okay, number three, granting the variance would do substantial justice because.
The proposed project is consistent with the area's current use. There is no gain to the public that outweighs the loss to the individual property owner.
We all agree that.
And last language again, with additional conditions and discussions as reflected in the meeting minutes.
I'll take a vote to accept those stipulations on number 3.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Okay, number 4. If the variance were granted, the values of surrounding properties would not be diminished.
Because the proposed project is consistent with the area's current use and abutting properties. Granting the variance does not block any surrounding views. In fact, it allows for further protection of the current views, and the proposed use does not decrease property values. And with additional conditions and discussions as reflected in the meeting minutes.
Everybody agree?
So moved.
Got you, Dre. Delia backs that up. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained. Number 5, unnecessary hardship.
Okay, I'll read this one. Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, because denial of the variance would create hardship in rendering the lot extremely difficult to develop and create a scenario whereby any development would become uncharacteristic with the abutting properties. And with additional conditions and discussion as reflected in the meeting minutes. Okay, so part of the uniqueness is the severe steepness. And let's add this to it. I'm just suggesting, you don't have to buy it. But that this is in a 25-foot setback in the area. And in addition, the property boundary line is approximately 15 feet from the edge of Hay Hill Road. So that is quite a large and significant setback before any building can occur. So it has an extra large building setback. And with, the additional
Motion to approve that.
Anybody second the motion to approve that?
Second.
Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstained. Okay, we'll move on.
Okay, and I think that is,
Do we need to do aye?
and the proposed use is a reasonable one because the proposed use is reasonable, is it consistent with the surrounding properties and within the spirit of the ordinance. And if we choose the rest of that, then we don't need to address B, which is the other part, is sort of an alternative part.
But you would add that condition, Carol, relative to the rest of the minutes.
Okay, so granting the variance would result in the property development being more harmonious with the sloping site. And strict conformance with the ordinance would be to the detriment of the area. So that's good language to add, I think. And the, with additional conditions and discussions as reflected in the meeting minutes. There we go.
Motion to approve as calculated.
Got Delia with a motion. Anybody second it?
Yeah.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained. Thank you.
Okay, so now do a final vote on whether or not to grant the variance.
Does anybody want to make a motion to grant the variance as written with stipulations
So moved.
And conditions.
and conditions?
And conditions.
So moved. You a second on that?
Second.
Okay, second by Ray DeMonte. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We've been
Okay,
fairly successful.
so then motion to adjourn.
Oh, Public comment, comment by the fire chief.
No, Judy had a question. B. Russell is the applicant, Beth Russell.
Yeah,
Who is Kay Halloran?
Kim Howard?
And that person identify yourself for the minutes?
Yes, sure. My name is Kim Halloran. I'm a resident of Beechwood.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, so we close the meeting? Motion to adjourn. Seconded by Delia, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.